Fighters from Russia's Wagner group say they've stepped up their attacks from the north and the south of the town. A win here.
Игрушки закончились, вы все военные.
Никакого материального обеспечения, ровным счетом ничего.
Support from Moscow. The ammunition this time promised in February. He warned if they fail in Bakhmut, Russian front lines could collapse.
How Putin spent 20 years rebuilding Russia's military, destroyed it in Ukraine in 14 months. Are you curious about how Vladimir Putin spent 20 years rebuilding Russia's military only to simply destroy it in Ukraine? Well, you're not alone. In this video, we explore how Putin rebuilt and reformed Russia's military over the last 2 decades, turning it into a formidable force with advanced warships, aircraft, and troops. However, the military was shattered during the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Mark Galeotti, an expert on Russian security, notes that Putin spent 22 years building a military structure and then destroyed it. But how did Putin come to power with no military experience and push for the Russian military to become a serious power? What happened during the Georgian conflict in 2008 that forced the Russian military to undergo serious reforms? And how did those reforms change the way the military looked and functioned? The Russian military's latest actions in Ukraine have raised concerns about the true effectiveness of these reforms. Stick around and find out. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Now, let's dive in the video. Vladimir Putin has been in power for over 2 decades, and during his tenure, he aimed to restore and reform Russia's military. His efforts to modernize the armed forces transformed it into a robust and versatile force capable of carrying out various operations worldwide. With advanced aircraft, warships, and well-trained troops, backed up by the world's most extensive nuclear arsenal, Russia's military seemed invincible. However, according to experts, the Ukrainian conflict shattered Putin's plans. When Putin became president in 1999, the Russian military was in a state of catastrophic decay. The government lacked the resources to look after, control, and protect it. This situation led to soldiers living in unheated tank sheds, and some were even not being paid. The military became a threat to Russia and its neighbors' security, not a guarantee of it. Despite Putin's background in the Soviet intelligence apparatus, he had no relationship with the military when he came to power. He believed that Russia needed to be a serious military power, and for that, he envisioned a great power status, which involved the capacity to intimidate or coerce other countries to do what Russia wanted. Over the next 8 years, Russia waged 2 wars, one in Chechnya and a shorter one in Georgia. However, the military's underwhelming performance in the Georgia conflict in 2008 enabled Putin's defense minister to push through some serious reforms. Despite the fact that Russia's victory over Georgia was never in doubt due to the disproportion between the 2 countries' forces, Russia's military did not perform as neatly and effectively as expected. The war was a litany of complaints, with the military suffering more from friendly fire incidents and vehicle breakdowns than combat damage. The Russian leadership realized that they needed to drag the military out of its Soviet era and make it modern and agile. The new-look army was focused on quality, not quantity. It aimed to make the military a more formidable force to intimidate Russia's neighbors. Despite Putin's efforts to rebuild and modernize the Russian military, the Ukrainian conflict marked its downfall. Putin's involvement in Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea sparked international outrage, and Russia faced harsh economic sanctions from the West. The Ukrainian conflict also exposed significant shortcomings in the Russian military's performance. The Russian military's inability to decisively defeat Ukraine and the Western-backed Ukrainian government raised questions about its capabilities and Putin's vision for it. The Ukrainian conflict exposed Russia's lack of advanced weapons technology, inadequate training, and low morale among soldiers. The country's military technology is outdated and inadequate compared to Western countries. The conflict also showed a lack of coordination and integration between different military units, and the government's inability to manage a war in a modern world. The Ukrainian crisis demonstrated that Putin's dream of making Russia a great military power was nothing but an illusion. The Ukrainian conflict had significant consequences for Russia, both domestically and internationally. Domestically, it exposed the government's failure to provide a safe and secure environment for its citizens. Internationally, the conflict has led to Russia's isolation and tarnished its reputation as a great power. Russia's economy is suffering from sanctions, and the country has lost its status as a respected world power. That meant a reduction in the number of conscripts, a move towards trying to create a professional army, and one that was much more flexible and much more able to operate at some distance from its main bases. The result was that, by 2014, Russia had a military that was really quite impressive. They were able to deploy rapidly. They had quite an array of modern equipment. They had had some real-world experience in peacekeeping and combat operations in places like Syria, so they were battle-tested and they had demonstrated an ability to fight in a modern war. But then Ukraine happened. What happened to the Russian military in the wake of that conflict? Essentially, Putin and his inner circle miscalculated very badly. They thought that they could intervene in eastern Ukraine in a way that would allow them to both stabilize the region and create leverage over the Ukrainian government. And, of course, it went wrong. They ended up with a frozen conflict that was far from frozen, that involved a lot of bloodshed, and which still, of course, simmers on to this day. But the other thing that it did was really shatter the myth of the invincibility of the Russian military. The problem was really quite simply one of logistics. Ukraine was not a huge military power, but it was well placed to be able to resist a Russian invasion. It had forces that were close to the front line. It had some very good snipers, and perhaps most importantly, it had the ability to move quickly. So when the Russians intervened, they quickly found themselves in a situation where they were up against a very determined enemy, and the Ukrainian army demonstrated that it was capable of giving them a good fight. And so they had to pour in more and more troops, more and more resources, and it became increasingly clear that this was not going to be an easy victory. Moreover, it exposed a lot of the weaknesses that remained in the Russian military. For example, they had not really done very much to fix the problems that had been revealed in Georgia, so they were still struggling with things like inter-service cooperation. With the ability to deal with modern electronic warfare, and with some of the other areas where the modern battlefield is really fought, so the result was that they ended up with a much higher casualty rate than they had expected. They ended up with a very difficult and complicated conflict, and really one that demonstrated that there were real limits to what they could do. What do you think are the implications of this for Russia's security and for Putin's leadership? Well, I think it's quite clear that this was a major setback for Putin's vision of Russia as a serious military power. And it's also a setback for his attempts to demonstrate to his own people that he is a strong and competent leader. The fact that he was unable to secure a victory in Ukraine, the fact that he was unable to really stabilize the situation there, all of this has damaged his reputation. And it's also shown that the Russian military is not invincible. It's shown that there are real problems with it, and that some of the reforms that had been carried out had not really gone far enough. So it's a real challenge to his leadership. At the same time, it's also a challenge to Russia's security, because it shows that there are real limits to what they can do, and that their neighbors are not going to simply roll over and accept their aggression. It also highlights the importance of international cooperation and support for Ukraine, as well as the need for continued sanctions on Russia. This situation has far-reaching implications for the region and the world, and it is crucial that all parties involved work towards a peaceful resolution. The conflict in Ukraine has had a significant impact on Russia's economy, which was already struggling due to low oil prices and Western sanctions. Inflation has risen, and the value of the ruble has plummeted, making imports more expensive and hurting the purchasing power of ordinary Russians. Moreover, the conflict has also had a negative impact on Russia's international standing. The annexation of Crimea and support for separatists in Ukraine have been widely condemned by the international community, and Russia has been isolated diplomatically as a result. This has made it difficult for Russia to achieve its foreign policy goals, such as expanding its influence in the Middle East and Asia. Despite these challenges, Putin remains popular among many Russians who credit him with restoring the country's pride and global influence after the turmoil of the post-Soviet era. Putin's emphasis on stability and national sovereignty also resonates with many Russians who are wary of the perceived encroachment of Western influence on their country. However, there are also growing signs of discontent among younger Russians, who are more likely to be critical of Putin and his government's policies. The recent protests in support of opposition leader Alexei Navalny suggest that there is a significant segment of the population that is dissatisfied with the status quo and seeking change. Overall, Russia faces significant challenges both domestically and internationally, and the future direction of the country is uncertain. Thank you for watching our video about how Putin spent 20 years rebuilding Russia's military only to destroy it in Ukraine in 14 months. We hope you found it informative and interesting. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think about Putin's military strategy in the Ukrainian conflict? Leave a comment below and let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be alerted when we post new videos. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.